The sky above New Busan burned with streaks of orange and red. Daeho pressed his face against the reinforced window of the research station, watching as another orbital defense platform exploded in the distance. The debris scattered like dying stars, each piece reflecting the light of the planet's twin suns before tumbling into the atmosphere below. He had seen war before, but only in history files and training simulations. This was different. This was real, and humanity was losing badly. Daeho, we need to leave now. Hana's voice cut through his thoughts. She was already at the console, her fingers moving rapidly across the holographic interface. Data streams flowed from the station's core systems into portable storage units. 3 years of research on energy field manipulation, all being compressed into devices small enough to fit in their pockets. How long? Daeho asked, pulling himself away from the window. Outside, the defense guns had stopped firing. That was a bad sign. It meant the automated systems had been destroyed or compromised. 2 minutes, maybe less, Hana replied. Her voice stayed calm, but Daeho noticed the slight tremor in her hands. She was scared. They both were. The Valthari had arrived in human space 3 months ago. Nobody knew where they came from or what they wanted. They simply appeared at the edge of colonized space and began their systematic destruction of every human world they encountered. Their war machines were unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Each one was a perfect killing device, protected by shields that adapted to every weapon humans threw at them. Earth's military tried everything. Plasma cannons, railguns, nuclear missiles, particle beams. Nothing worked for long. The Valthari shields learned and adapted within minutes. A weapon that destroyed 10 machines in the first wave would barely scratch the paint on the 11th. Their artificial intelligence systems were beyond anything human science could match. The station shuddered. Daeho grabbed the edge of the console to steady himself. Through the window he could see them now. 3 Valthari war machines, each one the size of a small building, moving across the plains below. They walked on 6 legs that moved with disturbing grace. Their hull plating shifted colors, adapting to the environment. Weapons ports opened and closed along their armored bodies like breathing organs. Done. Hana yanked the storage units from the console and stuffed them into her jacket. The evacuation shuttle is waiting at landing pad 3. If we run, we can make it, they ran. The corridors of the research station echoed with alarm sirens and automated warnings. Most of the staff had evacuated hours ago, when the Valthari fleet first appeared in orbit. Only essential personnel remained, and now even they were fleeing. Daeho's lungs burned as they sprinted down the metal hallways. He wasn't a soldier. He was an engineer, 32 years old, who spent most of his time working with power systems and energy calculations. His body wasn't built for this kind of physical stress. Hana was faster. She reached the landing pad first and slammed her hand against the door controls. The heavy blast doors groaned open, revealing the shuttle beyond. It was small, designed for short orbital hops, but it would get them to the evacuation ships in high orbit. If they could reach orbit before the Valthari shot them down, they scrambled aboard. The pilot, a young woman named Misun, was already running through the launch sequence. Strap in quickly, she said without looking back. We have maybe 30 seconds before they target us. Daeho barely got his harness fastened before the shuttle lifted off. The acceleration pressed him back into his seat. Through the small viewport, he watched the research station shrink below them. A moment later, 3 brilliant beams of blue light struck the facility. The building vaporized instantly, leaving nothing but a crater of melted rock and twisted metal. They knew we were there, Hana whispered. They waited until we left. Misun shook her head, her eyes fixed on the navigation display. They didn't wait. They just don't care about individual targets. They destroy everything systematically. We were simply next on their list. The shuttle climbed higher, breaking through the cloud layer. More explosions dotted the landscape below. Cities, farms, industrial complexes. The Valthari weren't invading in the traditional sense. They weren't trying to conquer. They were erasing humanity from this world, one structure at a time. I'm picking up a transmission, Misun said suddenly. She adjusted the communication controls and a voice filled the small cabin. It was Admiral Yunho, the commanding officer of the Human Defense Fleet. This is a priority message to all surviving personnel in the new Busan system. The Admiral's voice was steady despite the chaos. Earth Command is issuing an unconventional warfare directive. We are requesting any and all personnel with scientific, engineering, or technical expertise to report to the military research complex on Earth. Standard warfare has failed. We need new ideas, new approaches, new weapons. Anyone with knowledge that might help humanity survive this war is asked to volunteer. Transportation will be provided from all evacuation points. The message repeated. Deho looked at Hana. She met his eyes and nodded slowly. They both understood what the Admiral was really saying. Humanity was desperate. The military was out of options and was now asking civilians for help. Will you go? Misan asked, glancing back at them. Yes, Deho said. The word came out before he fully thought about it. But once he said it, he knew it was right. He couldn't fight with guns or fly warships, but he could solve problems. That was what engineers did. They found solutions when others saw only obstacles. The shuttle docked with an evacuation ship 20 minutes later. The ship was crowded with refugees from across the colony. Families huddled together, clutching whatever possessions they had managed to save. Children cried. Adults stared at nothing, shock written across their faces. Deho and Hana made their way to the registration desk. A tired-looking officer checked their credentials and marked them for transport to Earth. You'll transfer at the next jump gate, she said. Military transport will take you directly to the research complex. Good luck. As they waited for the transfer, Deho found a quiet corner where he could think. Hana sat beside him, still clutching the storage units containing their research data. Around them, humanity was in retreat, running from an enemy they couldn't defeat. Do you think we can actually help? Hana asked quietly. Deho wanted to say yes with confidence. He wanted to believe that human ingenuity would find a way, that clever engineering would save them. But he had seen the Valthari war machines. He had watched them adapt to every weapon, shrug off every attack. They seemed unstoppable. I don't know, he admitted. But we have to try. If we don't, who will? Through the viewport, he could see New Busan in the distance. The planet was still burning. Orange fires spread across continents where forests and cities once stood. The Valthari ships orbited slowly, methodically destroying everything below. Deho made a silent promise. Somehow, someway, he would find an answer. There had to be a weakness in those machines. Everything had a weakness. It was just a matter of finding it. The evacuation ship's engines rumbled to life. Soon they would jump to the next system, then to Earth. Hundreds of other scientists and engineers were probably making the same journey, all answering the Admiral's call. Somewhere among them, there had to be an idea that would work. There had to be a way to fight back. Because the alternative was too terrible to consider. The alternative was extinction. Earth looked smaller than Deho remembered. 3 years away on New Busan had changed his perspective. Or maybe it was just the circumstances. Hard to appreciate the beauty of your home world when an alien empire was systematically destroying every human colony in space. The military transport descended through heavy clouds. Rain pelted the viewports as they dropped toward the research complex somewhere in the mountains of what used to be called South Korea. The area had been expanded massively since Deho last saw it, with dozens of new buildings sprawling across the valleys. Attention all passengers, the pilot announced. We're approaching the military research complex. Upon landing, proceed directly to Building 7 for registration and assignment. Welcome to Project Sanctuary. Hana stirred in the seat beside him. She hadn't slept during the 3-day journey from New Busan. None of them had. Every time Deho closed his eyes, he saw those war machines walking across the burning plains. He wondered if that image would ever leave him. The transport landed on a massive platform already crowded with other ships. Thousands of people moved between buildings, all wearing the same expression of exhausted determination. These were the survivors, the ones who had escaped the Valthari advance and chosen to fight back with their minds instead of weapons. Registration took 2 hours. Deho and Hana filled out forms, submitted their research credentials, and received temporary quarters in one of the residential blocks. The officer processing them barely looked up. She had probably registered hundreds of scientists already today. Report to Conference Hall A at 1800 hours, she said, stamping their documents. Admiral Yunho will be addressing all new arrivals. They had 4 hours. Deho used the time to shower, change into clean clothes, and try to eat something from the cafeteria. The food tasted like cardboard, but he forced it down anyway. Hana did the same, though she pushed most of her meal around the plate without actually eating it. You need to eat, Deho said. I'm not hungry. Neither am I. Eat anyway. She smiled slightly at that. It was the first smile he'd seen from her since New Busan burned. When did you become the responsible one? When we became humanity's last hope, Daeho replied. He meant it as a joke, but it came out sounding serious. Conference Hall A was enormous, capable of holding several thousand people. Every seat was filled when Daeho and Hana arrived. Scientists, engineers, physicists, chemists, biologists. Humanity had gathered its greatest minds in one place, hoping that collective intelligence could achieve what military might could not. Admiral Yun Ho walked onto the stage precisely at 1800 hours. He was older than Daeho expected, maybe 60, with gray hair and a face marked by stress and lack of sleep. He wore his uniform well, but there was something defeated in his posture. Thank you all for coming, the Admiral began. No introduction, no formalities. I'm going to be direct because we don't have time for anything else. Humanity is losing this war. We will lose this war unless something changes dramatically and soon. He gestured and a holographic display appeared above the stage. It showed the known galaxy with human colonies marked in blue. As Daeho watched, the blue dots began winking out one by one, replaced by red markers indicating Valthari control. This is the projected timeline based on current combat data, Admiral Yun Ho continued. At the present rate of advance, the Valthari will reach Earth in approximately 6 months. Every engagement we fight delays them by hours at most. Our conventional military forces are being destroyed faster than we can replace them. The hall was silent. Everyone was doing the math in their heads. 6 months, half a year before humanity's homeworld became another burning husk like New Busan. The problem is adaptation, the Admiral said. He zoomed the display in on a single Valthari war machine. The image rotated slowly, showing the complex hull plating and the shimmer of energy shields. Their defensive systems learn from every attack. A weapon that works once becomes useless within minutes. We've tried overwhelming them with numbers, but their shields adapt to mass fire just as quickly as individual shots. We've tried exotic particles, dimensional weapons, everything our physicists could imagine. Nothing works for long. A hand raised in the front row. Admiral Yun Ho nodded. Have we tried biological weapons? Someone asked. Yes. The war machines are fully sealed. No organic material inside. They're pure machine, controlled by artificial intelligence far beyond our current capability. More hands went up. The Admiral answered questions for 20 minutes. Computer viruses? Tried, failed. The Valthari networks were too alien, too secure. Diplomatic contact? Attempted repeatedly. No response. The Valthari didn't communicate. They just destroyed. Tactical nuclear weapons? Used in desperation. The shields adapted to radiation within seconds. Daeho listened to all of it, his engineer's mind trying to find patterns, looking for that one detail that didn't fit, but everything made horrible sense. The Valthari had built the perfect war machine. Perfect defense, perfect offense, perfect adaptation. So why are we here? Someone finally asked. If nothing works, what can we possibly do? Admiral Yun Ho's expression hardened. Because giving up is not an option. Because somewhere in this room might be an idea we haven't tried yet. Because human creativity has solved impossible problems before, and we need it to do so again. He paused, looking across the thousands of faces staring back at him. You are the best scientific minds humanity has. You understand principles that most people cannot grasp. You see connections others miss. Your job, starting tomorrow, is to break into teams and explore every possible avenue of attack. No idea is too crazy. No approach is too unconventional. We need you to think beyond standard warfare, beyond traditional weapons. The Admiral's voice dropped lower, almost to a whisper, but the hall's acoustics carried it to every corner. We need you to save our species. The meeting ended shortly after. People filed out in small groups, already talking, already brainstorming. Daeho and Hana walked slowly, letting the crowd flow around them. Perfect adaptation, Hana said quietly. That's the key phrase. Perfect adaptation to complexity. Daeho looked at her. What do you mean? Their shields adapt to whatever we throw at them. Plasma, radiation, kinetic energy, electromagnetic pulses. Everything we try is sophisticated, complex. Our weapons are marvels of engineering. She stopped walking, forcing others to move around them. What if that's the problem? Before Daeho could respond, someone bumped into him. A man, maybe 40 years old, wearing civilian clothes under a worn laboratory coat. He was thin, with wild hair and eyes that seemed to look through people rather than at them. Sorry, the man said. Then he paused, studying them both. You two look like you're having an interesting conversation. Mind if I join? Sure, Daeho said, unsure how to respond. Jiwoo, the man introduced himself. Theoretical physics, specializing in historical warfare applications. Yes, that's a real field. No, I don't usually get invited to parties. Despite everything, Daeho smiled. Daeho, this is Hana. We're engineers, energy systems mostly. Excellent. Jiwoo's enthusiasm seemed completely disconnected from the dire situation they were in. I need engineers. Come on, I've got a workspace in Building 12. Let's talk about how primitive humans used to kill each other before we got all sophisticated about it. Hana and Daeho exchanged glances. This man was clearly eccentric, possibly unstable. But there was something in his eyes, a spark of genuine intelligence beneath the odd behavior. Why historical warfare? Hana asked as they followed Jiwoo through the complex. Because modern warfare is about technology, Jiwoo explained, walking backwards so he could face them while talking. But old warfare, really old warfare, was about psychology and simplicity. Swords, arrows, catapults, simple machines that did simple things. You couldn't outsmart a sword with shields that adapt. You could only dodge it or block it with something harder. He spun around, nearly colliding with a doorframe, and led them into a cluttered workspace. Papers covered every surface, along with old books, actual physical books, showing diagrams of ancient weapons and battle formations. The Valthari machines adapt to complexity, Jiwoo continued, clearing space on a table by sweeping everything onto the floor. So what happens if we attack them with something so simple, their adaptation systems don't know what to do with it? Daeho sat down slowly. The idea was insane, but it was also the first new thought he'd heard since arriving on Earth. Explain, he said. Jiwoo grinned. Glad you asked. Jiwoo spread a large sheet of paper across the table. It showed a detailed diagram of a Valthari war machine, covered in annotations and calculations. Some were in Korean, others in English, and several in what looked like ancient Chinese characters. Look at this, he said, tapping the section showing the shield generators. The adaptive defense system works by analyzing incoming threats in real time. Energy signature, velocity, mass, trajectory, everything. It processes millions of data points per second and adjusts the shield frequency to neutralize the threat. Daeho leaned closer, studying the notes. We already know this. Every weapons team has been trying to overcome the adaptation speed. Exactly. Jiwoo's eyes lit up. Everyone is trying to be faster than the system. But what if we don't need to be faster? What if we need to be simpler? Hana frowned. I'm not following. Jiwoo pulled out another paper, this one showing an ancient stone-throwing device called a trebuchet. Human warfare started simple. You picked up a rock and threw it at your enemy. Then we got clever. Slings to throw rocks farther, bows to shoot arrows faster, catapults to launch heavy objects. But the basic principle remained the same. Kinetic energy. Mass times velocity. Nothing exotic, nothing electronic. The Valthari shields can stop kinetic weapons, Daeho pointed out. We've tried railguns and mass drivers. They adapt within seconds. Because your railguns use electromagnetic acceleration, Jiwoo countered. They produce massive energy signatures. The Valthari sensors detect the charge buildup before you even fire. Their AI has time to adjust. But what if there's no energy signature to detect? He pulled out a third diagram, this one hand-drawn. It showed a simple tube with a projectile inside and a chemical reaction chamber behind it. A gun, he said. An actual primitive chemical propellant gun, like humans used 300 years ago. Daeho stared at the drawing. It was absurdly simple. Explosives in a chamber, expanding gases pushing a metal slug down a barrel. No computers, no energy fields, no sophisticated targeting systems, just basic chemistry and physics. Their shields would still stop it, Hana said, but her voice had doubt in it now. Would they? Jiwoo challenged. Their sensors are designed to detect advanced threats. Energy weapons, smart missiles, particle beams. A simple chemical explosion produces minimal electromagnetic signature. By the time their AI registers the threat, the projectile has already left the barrel. Daeho's mind was racing now, engineer instincts kicking in. But adaptation is still a problem. Fire once, maybe you get through. Fire twice, the shields adjust to kinetic impacts at that velocity. Yes, Jiwoo practically bounced with excitement. So we make every shot different. Different barrel lengths, different powder charges, different projectile masses. Mechanical variation instead of electronic precision. No two shots exactly alike. That's inefficient, Deho said automatically. Quality control would be a nightmare. Efficiency is what got us into this mess, Jiwoo shot back. We made perfect weapons with perfect precision. The Valthari AI loves perfection. It can predict it, analyze it, counter it. But randomness? Mechanical imperfection? That's harder to adapt to. Hana stood up suddenly, pacing across the cluttered room. You're talking about deliberately introducing mechanical variants. Making weapons that are intentionally imprecise. Not imprecise, Jiwoo corrected. Unpredictable. There's a difference. Deho closed his eyes, running calculations in his head. The energy requirements would be minimal compared to plasma weapons. Manufacturing would be simple, almost primitive by modern standards. Any basic industrial facility could produce them. But would it actually work? We need to test it, he said finally. Already working on it, Jiwoo replied. He opened a cabinet and pulled out what looked like a crude metal tube attached to a wooden stock. Built this yesterday. It's a replica of a 20th century rifle, single-shot manual operation. I was planning to test it tomorrow at the firing range. That won't tell us if it can penetrate Valthari shields, Hana pointed out. No, Jiwoo admitted, but it will tell us if the basic principle works. We need to start somewhere. The door to the workspace opened. A woman entered carrying a datapad and looking harassed. She was younger than Deho, maybe late 20s, with sharp eyes that took in the room's chaos without judgment. Jiwoo, you're supposed to be at the team assignments meeting, she said. Then she noticed Deho and Hana. Oh, you found recruits? Sumin, meet Deho and Hana, Jiwoo said. Engineers with actual practical experience. Daiho Hana, this is Sumin. She's a systems analyst and the only person keeping me organized. That's a full-time job, Sumin said dryly. She looked at the diagram spread across the table. Still working on your primitive weapons theory? It's not a theory anymore, Jiwoo said. It's a hypothesis ready for testing. There's a difference? Sumin asked. About 2 weeks of paperwork, Jiwoo replied. Deho found himself liking these people. In the midst of humanity's greatest crisis, they could still joke, still maintain some semblance of normal interaction. It helped keep the panic at bay. What's the team assignment meeting? Hana asked. They're dividing everyone into research groups, Sumin explained. Energy weapons, biological approaches, cyber warfare, that sort of thing. Each team gets resources and lab space based on their proposal's viability assessment. We should submit our idea, Deho said suddenly. The more he thought about it, the more sense it made. Not as a complete solution, but as an approach worth exploring. Already did, Jiwoo said. Last week. They rejected it. Said it was too primitive to be effective against advanced alien technology. Of course they did, Sumin added. Because a committee of military planners is exactly who you want evaluating unconventional scientific ideas. So we work on it anyway, Deho said. Prove the concept works, then show them the results. That's my thinking, Jiwoo agreed. But I'm going to need help. Real engineering support, not just theoretical physics. You two in? Deho looked at Hana. She nodded slowly. We're in, he said. Excellent. Jiwoo started gathering papers, already moving on to the next step. Tomorrow morning, we test the rifle. If it performs to specifications, we start working on refinements. Sumin, can you pull the detailed scan data on Valthari shield frequencies? Already have it, she said, tapping her datapad. Also the combat recordings from the last 50 engagements. If we're going to understand how to beat their adaptation, we need to see exactly how it works. They worked through the night. Sumin pulled up battle footage, showing frame-by-frame analysis of how Valthari shields responded to different weapons. Hana and Deho ran calculations on projectile velocities and chemical propellants. Jiwoo sketched designs for launcher mechanisms, each one slightly different from the last. Around 3 in the morning, Deho realized something. The mechanical variation isn't random, he said. We can't just make sloppy weapons and hope they work. We need controlled variation. Meaning? Hana asked through a yawn. Meaning we engineer the unpredictability, Deho explained. Different barrel rifling patterns, varying powder charges, projectiles with different aerodynamic properties. Each weapon is precisely made, but no two are made the same way. That's going to be expensive to produce, Sumin noted. Not if we do it right, Deho countered. Simple mechanical tolerances. Use different manufacturing facilities, different tool sets. The natural variation in industrial production becomes an advantage instead of a flaw. Jiwoo was nodding enthusiastically. Yes, we're not trying to make perfect weapons. We're trying to make good enough weapons that are all slightly different. Good enough to kill Valthari war machines, Hana added quietly. That sobered the mood. They weren't playing with theoretical concepts anymore. If this worked, if they could actually develop a weapon that bypassed Valthari shields, people would use it in combat. Soldiers would carry these devices into battle. Some of those soldiers wouldn't come back. We need to make sure it works, Daeho said. If we're going to ask people to fight with these, we need to be certain they'll actually help. Agreed, Jiwoo said. So tomorrow we test, and we keep testing until we're sure. The sun was rising when they finally stopped working. Daeho's eyes burned with fatigue and his brain felt fuzzy, but he also felt something he hadn't felt since New Busan burned. Hope. Maybe they had an answer. Maybe this crazy idea of fighting advanced technology with primitive weapons could actually work. Get some sleep, Sumin ordered. We'll meet at the testing range at noon. Jiwoo, that means you have to sleep too. No staying up to tinker. I don't tinker, Jiwoo protested. I refine. You tinker, all three of them said in unison. Walking back to their quarters, Hana spoke quietly. Do you really think this will work? I don't know, Daeho admitted. But it's the first idea I've heard that makes sense. Everything else is just trying to beat the Valthari at their own game. This is playing a different game entirely. Good enough, Hana said. It would have to be. The testing range was located underground, deep beneath the research complex. Security was tight. Daeho and Hana had to pass through 3 checkpoints before reaching the firing lanes where Jiwoo waited with his primitive rifle. You're late, Jiwoo said, though he didn't sound upset. He was too focused on adjusting something on the weapon's mechanism. We stopped for coffee, Hana said. Some of us need sleep occasionally. Sleep is for people who aren't trying to save humanity, Jiwoo replied absently. He held up the rifle. I made some modifications last night. Added a slightly longer barrel, adjusted the firing chamber. Want to see how it shoots? Sumin arrived carrying a metal case. She set it down and opened it, revealing 6 small cylindrical objects. Shield generator samples, she explained. Salvaged from destroyed Valthari machines. They're damaged but still functional enough for testing. Daeho picked one up carefully. It was surprisingly light, maybe half a kilogram. The surface was smooth, almost organic looking, with patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. This small device could project a shield capable of stopping plasma fire, nuclear radiation, and kinetic impacts at hypersonic speeds. How are we testing it? He asked. Sumin set up one of the generators on a stand 50 meters downrange. She activated it with a remote control. A faint shimmer appeared in the air around the device, barely visible but definitely there. Shield's active, she confirmed. It's only at about 30% power because of the damage, but it should be enough to demonstrate the principle. Jiwoo loaded his rifle with a single bullet. The ammunition was simple, just a lead projectile and chemical propellant. Nothing sophisticated, nothing that would register on advanced sensors as a significant threat. Ready? He asked. Ready? Daeho confirmed. Jiwoo aimed carefully and pulled the trigger. The rifle cracked loudly in the enclosed space. Downrange, the shield shimmered more brightly for an instant. Then sparks flew from the generator as something inside shorted out. They all stared in silence for a moment. Did that just work? Hana asked. Sumin was already checking her datapad, reading telemetry from the shield generator. The shield detected the projectile approximately 0.003 seconds before impact. It attempted to adjust frequency to create a kinetic barrier, but didn't complete the adaptation before the bullet hit. 3 milliseconds, Daeho said. That's not enough time to adapt. Exactly, Jiwoo said, his voice trembling slightly with excitement. The shield's AI needs time to analyze the threat and respond. Against energy weapons, it has that time because it can detect the charge buildup. Against this, it only gets the split second when the bullet is in flight. One test isn't enough, Hana cautioned. We need to confirm it wasn't a fluke. They ran the test 4 more times with the remaining shield generators. Each time, the result was the same. The shields detected the projectiles too late to adapt properly. 3 of the 5 generators were damaged by the impacts. The other 2 managed partial adaptations that slowed but didn't stop the bullets. 30% power shields, Sumin reminded them. Full power shields on actual war machines might adapt faster. Or they might not, Jiwoo countered. The adaptation speed is limited by physics. Light only travels so fast, sensors only process so quickly. 3 milliseconds might be the best they can do. Daeho was already thinking ahead. We need to refine the design. The rifle works, but it's too slow to reload. In combat, soldiers would need to fire repeatedly, quickly. Magazine-fed system, Hana suggested. Spring-loaded mechanical feed. Old technology, but reliable. And we need variety, Jiwoo added. Different barrel lengths, different projectile weights. If the Valthari shields do start adapting to one configuration, we hit them with a different one. A voice spoke from behind them. That's assuming the military approves this for production. They turned. Admiral Yunho stood at the entrance to the firing range, accompanied by 2 other officers. None of them looked pleased. Admiral, Jiwoo said, straightening slightly, we were just conducting preliminary tests. With equipment you weren't authorized to build and shield generators you weren't authorized to requisition. One of the other officers said sharply. He was younger than the Admiral, with the insignia of a colonel on his uniform. Do you have any idea how valuable those generators are for research? We just proved they're vulnerable to simple kinetic weapons, Daeho said. That seems like valuable research. The colonel's face reddened, but Admiral Yunho held up a hand. Show me the data. Suman handed over her data pad without hesitation. The Admiral studied it carefully, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, he spoke. 5 out of 5 successful penetrations. Even accounting for reduced power levels, this is significant. It's a waste of time, the colonel said. Primitive weapons against advanced alien technology. We should be focusing on next-generation energy shields, quantum disruption fields, not playing with antiques. Your next-generation shields have failed repeatedly, Colonel. Admiral Yunho said mildly. Perhaps it's time to consider that advancement isn't always the answer. He handed the data pad back to Suman. You 4 have 72 hours to develop a working prototype. Something that can be mass-produced quickly and used effectively in combat. If you can demonstrate its viability, I'll authorize production. If not, you'll be reassigned to other teams. That's not enough time, the colonel protested. Then they'll fail and you'll be proven right, Admiral Yunho replied. He looked at Daeho and the others. 72 hours. Don't waste them, he left. The colonel glared at them before following, muttering something about proper protocols. As soon as they were alone, Jiwoo let out a breath. 72 hours to save humanity. No pressure. We can do this, Daeho said with more confidence than he felt. We have the basic principle proven. Now we just need to engineer it properly. They moved their operation to a larger workshop space. Suman requisitioned manufacturing equipment, basic tools, and raw materials. Hana designed a magazine feeding system that could hold 20 rounds and reload quickly. Daeho worked on optimizing the barrel design for maximum velocity with minimal energy signature. Jiwoo coordinated everything, his chaotic energy somehow keeping them focused and moving forward. The first complete prototype was ready 18 hours later. It looked crude compared to standard military weapons. The body was simple machined metal, the stock was polymer composite, and the mechanism was entirely mechanical with no electronic components at all. It's ugly, Hana said. It's beautiful, Jiwoo countered. Beauty is function, and this functions perfectly. They tested it on the range. The magazine fed smoothly. The recoil was manageable. The accuracy at 50 meters was acceptable, not perfect, but good enough for combat ranges. Most importantly, it worked. Every shot they fired performed consistently. Now we make 5 more, Daeho said, each one with slightly different specifications. Over the next 2 days, they built and tested 6 complete weapons. Each had unique characteristics. Different barrel lengths from 40 to 60 centimeters. Different rifling patterns. Different spring tensions in the magazine feeds. Projectiles of varying weights and shapes. When they tested all 6 against salvaged shield generators, the results were consistent. The shields couldn't adapt fast enough. They might slow one bullet, but the next came from a different weapon with different characteristics, and the shield had to start its analysis process over again. On the 3rd day, Admiral Yunho returned with a full committee of military officers and senior scientists. They watched skeptically as Daeho's team demonstrated the weapons. Effective range? One officer asked. Approximately 200 meters, Hana replied. Beyond that, accuracy dropped significantly. Standard plasma rifles are effective at 1,000 meters. Another officer pointed out. Standard plasma rifles don't work at all anymore, Jiwoo said bluntly. The Valthari shields have adapted to them.
These weapons haven't been adapted to yet. How long before they do adapt?
Someone asked. Unknown, Su-min admitted. But the mechanical variation makes it harder. They're not fighting one weapon. They're fighting potentially thousands of different weapons, each with unique characteristics. More questions followed. Manufacturing costs, production time, training requirements, ammunition supply. Daeho and his team answered everything as thoroughly as they could. Some answers were confident. Others were educated guesses. They'd only had 72 hours. Finally, Admiral Yun-ho spoke. I'm authorizing limited production. 1,000 units to be distributed to frontline combat units for field testing. If they perform as demonstrated, we'll move to full-scale production. Admiral, I must protest, the colonel from earlier began. Your protest is noted, Colonel. Admiral Yun-ho cut him off. But I'm not going to reject a potentially effective weapon because it offends our sense of technological progress. He looked at Daeho. You and your team will oversee the production and training. I want weekly reports on combat effectiveness. Yes, sir, Daeho said. After the committee left, the four of them stood in the workshop surrounded by their crude weapons. We did it, Hana said softly. We proved the concept, Daeho corrected. Now comes the hard part, making enough of them to actually matter in the war. And hoping they work as well in real combat as they do on a test range, Su-min added. Jiwoo Pai. The factory floor stretched out before them, massive and loud with the sound of machinery. 3 weeks ago, this facility had been producing plasma cannons at a rate of 20 per day. Now it made something much simpler and far more quickly. Daeho watched as another completed weapon came off the assembly line. A worker picked it up, checked the action, test-fired it into a containment box and set it in a shipping crate with 19 others. Every 15 minutes, another crate was sealed and sent to the distribution center. We're at 1,200 units per day across all factories, Su-min said, reading from her datapad. That's ahead of the Admiral's projections. It's not enough, Hana replied. She stood next to a holographic display showing the war's progress. Red markers indicated Valthari positions. Blue markers showed human forces. There was a lot more red than blue. We need tens of thousands of these weapons. Maybe hundreds of thousands. We'll get there, Daeho said. He wished he felt as confident as he sounded. The initial field tests had been promising but mixed. Soldiers equipped with the new weapons, which someone had started calling kinetic rifles, reported successful engagements against Valthari war machines. The shields couldn't adapt quickly enough to stop the primitive projectiles. But there were problems. The effective range was short compared to energy weapons. Soldiers had to get closer to the enemy, which meant more casualties. The weapons were also unfamiliar. Troops trained on advanced plasma systems struggled with the mechanical simplicity of loading magazines and clearing jams. We've got another problem, Jiwoo said, joining them. He looked exhausted. They all did. Sleep had become something that happened in brief intervals between crises. Some commanders are refusing to distribute the weapons to their units. On what grounds? Daeho asked, though he could guess. They think it's insulting, giving soldiers primitive weapons when they should have the latest technology. Jiwoo's voice was bitter. They'd rather lose with dignity than win with something that looks like it came from a museum. Can Admiral Yun-ho override them? Hana asked. He's trying, Su-min said. But the military chain of command is complicated. Some regional commanders have significant autonomy. They can refuse to implement new equipment if they deem it inappropriate. Daeho wanted to scream. They'd solved the technical problem. They'd created a weapon that worked against Valthari shields. But now they were losing time because of pride and bureaucracy. We need to prove it works beyond any doubt, he said finally. One undeniable victory using these weapons. Something so clear that even the stubborn commanders can't ignore it. There's an opportunity coming up, Su-min said, pulling up a star chart. New Seoul. The colony is under siege but still holding. If we could equip the defenders there with kinetic rifles and hold off the Valthari, that would be the proof we need. How many defenders? Hana asked. About 3,000 active military personnel, plus maybe 10,000 civilian militia. We can get them 5,000 rifles by the end of the week, Daeho calculated. That's enough for every soldier to have one, plus training ammunition. It's risky, Jiwoo warned. If it fails, the whole program might get canceled. If we don't try, the program is useless anyway, Daeho countered. We need this victory. They presented the plan to Admiral Yun-ho that evening. He listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. New Sol is important strategically, he said when they finished. Losing it would give the Valthari a staging ground for pushing deeper into human space. But if we commit resources there and fail, we've lost both the colony and valuable equipment. If we don't commit, we lose the colony anyway, Deho said. At least this way we're trying something new. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Do it. I'll arrange fast transport for the weapons and training personnel. But understand, if this fails, there won't be another chance. The opposition to this program is strong. One failure and they'll have the ammunition to shut us down. Understood, Sir, Deho said. The next 5 days were chaos. Weapons poured off production lines and went directly to transport ships. Daiho, Hana, Jiwoo, and Su-min all traveled to New Sol to oversee the distribution and training personally. The colony was battered but not broken. Valthari forces had been probing the defenses for weeks, slowly grinding down the human positions. The defenders were exhausted, low on ammunition for their conventional weapons, and facing an enemy that seemed impossible to stop. You're telling me these are going to save us? Commander Taemin looked at the kinetic rifle in his hands with obvious skepticism. He was the military leader of New Sol's defense, a career soldier who'd been fighting the Valthari since the war began. This looks like something my grandfather would have used. That's the point, Jiwoo explained for what felt like the 100th time. The Valthari shields are designed for modern weapons. These aren't modern. The shields adapt to everything, Taemin said. I've seen it. Plasma fire, missiles, even nuclear warheads. Nothing works for long. Because all those weapons give the shields time to adapt, Deho said. He picked up one of the rifles. This doesn't. By the time their sensors register the threat, the bullet is already hitting their hull. Taemin clearly didn't believe them, but orders were orders. He organized training sessions for his troops. Soldiers who'd spent years mastering plasma rifles now learned to load magazines, clear jams, and aim iron sights. Many complained. Some refused outright. Hana worked with the civilian militia, who were more open to the new weapons. They hadn't been using energy weapons before, so switching to something mechanical wasn't as jarring. At least it's simple, one militia member said. Point, shoot, load another magazine. I can do that. That's all you need to do, Hana assured her. The Valthari attack came on the 6th day. 3 war machines advanced on the city's eastern perimeter, supported by smaller combat drones. It was a probing attack, testing the defenses, looking for weaknesses. Commander Taemin deployed conventional forces first. Plasma fire lit up the morning sky. The Valthari shields shimmered and held. The war machines kept advancing, their weapons returning fire with devastating accuracy. Human positions exploded under directed energy beams. Now, Deho said, watching from the command center, send in the units with kinetic rifles. Taemin gave the order reluctantly. 200 soldiers moved forward, spreading out across the defensive line. They got within 150 meters of the war machines before opening fire. The sound was different from energy weapons. Sharper, more primitive. Hundreds of chemical propellant charges detonating, driving metal projectiles downrange at supersonic speeds. The first Valthari war machine's shields flickered uncertainly. Projectiles punched through, hitting the hull plating. Sparks flew. One of the machine's legs buckled. It tried to compensate, but more bullets found weak points in the armor. Something inside detonated, and the entire machine collapsed in a shower of debris. The second machine attempted to adjust its shield frequency, but the projectiles came from dozens of different weapons, each slightly different. The shields couldn't adapt fast enough to all of them. It lasted 15 seconds longer than the first before multiple hits penetrated its power core. The third machine tried to retreat, but it was too slow. Concentrated fire from the kinetic rifles tore it apart systematically. The entire engagement lasted 4 minutes. 3 Valthari war machines destroyed. Human casualties, 12 wounded, none dead. The command center was silent. Everyone stared at the tactical displays showing the smoking wrecks of the alien machines. Did that just happen? Someone whispered. Commander Taemin slowly turned to look at Deho. How many more of those rifles can you get me? As many as you need, Deho replied. Word of the victory spread quickly through military channels. Suddenly, commanders who'd been skeptical were requesting kinetic rifles for their units. Production facilities received urgent orders to increase output. Training programs expanded rapidly, but there were still doubters. One engagement doesn't prove anything, Colonel Park argued at a strategy meeting. The Valthari will adapt eventually. They always do. Then we keep adapting too, Jiwoo said. We're already working on variations. Different projectile types, different propellants, different firing mechanisms. The Valthari can't adapt to everything at once. It's buying us time, Admiral Yunho said firmly. And time is what we desperately need. Every day we hold them back is another day to develop more solutions. The Admiral looked at Daeho and his team. I want production increased to 50,000 units per week. Distribute them to every frontline unit. Make training mandatory. As of now, kinetic rifles are standard issue alongside energy weapons. Yes, sir, Daeho said. After the meeting, the four of them stood outside the command building looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Valthari were still advancing. But for the first time since the war began, humanity had struck back effectively. It's working, Hana said softly. It's actually working for now, Sumin cautioned. But Jiwoo is right. We need to keep developing new variations. The moment we become predictable, we lose our advantage. Then we don't become predictable, Daeho said. We up them guessing. Make every weapon unique, every engagement different. How very human of us, Jiwoo said with a slight smile, using our chaos as a weapon. New Seoul's eastern district was a mess of rubble and makeshift fortifications. 2 weeks after the first successful engagement, the Valthari were back in force. This time they weren't just probing. This was a full assault meant to take the city. Private Kyung-soo crouched behind a collapsed building, his kinetic rifle clutched in sweaty hands. He'd been a soldier for 3 years, trained on the latest plasma weapons and tactical systems. Now he was carrying what looked like an antique from a museum, but he'd seen what these weapons could do. He'd watched 3 war machines fall in minutes. Remember your training, Sergeant Dong-hyun said from beside him. The sergeant was older, maybe 40, with the kind of calm that only came from surviving multiple combat zones. Short-controlled bursts. Don't waste ammunition. Wait for them to get close. How close? Kyung-soo asked. His voice shook slightly. 100 meters. Maybe less. These things work best at ranges where you can actually see your target clearly. The ground shook. Through the gaps in the rubble, Kyung-soo could see them coming. 7 Valthari war machines, each one moving with that terrible grace that made them seem alive. Behind them came smaller combat drones, dozens of them scuttling across the broken ground like metallic insects. Steady, Dong-hyun called out to the 40 soldiers spread across the defensive position. Let them close the gap. Energy weapons fire on my mark. The waiting was the worst part. Kyung-soo watched the machines advance, getting larger with each step. His finger rested on the trigger. The rifle felt heavy in his hands. Not physically heavy, but weighted with importance. If this weapon failed, if the shields had somehow adapted, they were all dead. Mark, Dong-hyun shouted. The soldiers still carrying plasma rifles opened fire. Blue-white beams lanced across the distance, striking the Valthari shields. The shields shimmered and held exactly as expected. The war machines continued forward, unbothered by the conventional weapons. Kinetic weapons at will, Dong-hyun ordered. Kyung-soo pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked against his shoulder, sharper than a plasma weapon but manageable. The sound was different too, a sharp crack that echoed off the ruined buildings. Around him, 40 other kinetic rifles fired in a ragged chorus. The leading war machine's shields flickered. For a moment, Kyung-soo thought they were going to hold. Then he saw sparks fly from the machine's hull as projectiles punched through. One of its weapons ports shattered. Another hit struck something important, and smoke began pouring from a joint in its armor. But the machine kept coming. Wounded but not stopped, it returned fire with devastating accuracy. A plasma beam swept across the defensive line. 3 soldiers to Kyung-soo's left simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the concentrated energy. Keep firing, Dong-hyun's voice cut through the chaos. Focus on the wounded one. Bring it down, Kyung-soo reloaded. His hands shook as he slammed a fresh magazine into place. He aimed at the damaged war machine and fired again. More hits registered. The machine's movements became erratic. One leg dragged. Its return fire grew less accurate. Then something inside it exploded. The war machine collapsed in a heap of twisted metal, smoke, and sparking electrical systems. 1 down. 6 to go. The battle descended into brutal close-quarters fighting. The Valthari machines pushed into the defensive perimeter, using their bulk and firepower to devastating effect. The human soldiers scattered, taking cover wherever they could. firing their kinetic rifles from point-blank range. Kyung-soo found himself separated from his unit, hiding in the basement of a destroyed building. Through a gap in the debris, he could see a war machine methodically destroying positions, its plasma cannons reducing concrete and steel to molten slag. He should run. Every instinct screamed at him to find an exit and get away. But running meant abandoning the defensive line. It meant letting the machine push deeper into the city, where civilians were sheltering. He checked his ammunition. 2 magazines left, 40 rounds total. Taking a deep breath, Kyung-soo climbed up through the rubble until he had a clear line of sight to the war machine. It was maybe 30 meters away, close enough that he could see individual plates of armor on its hull, close enough to see the slight shimmer of its shields. He aimed at the joint where one of the legs connected to the main body. That's where the armor would be thinnest, where the machine needed flexibility to move. He fired 5 times in quick succession. The war machine's shields tried to adapt, flickering through different frequencies. But they weren't fast enough. 3 of the 5 shots penetrated, striking the exposed hydraulics and power conduits in the leg joint. The machine noticed him. Its central weapons turret rotated, targeting his position. Kyung-soo didn't run. He kept firing, magazine after magazine, pouring rounds into that damaged leg. The machine fired back. The building around him exploded in a shower of debris and fire. Something heavy hit him, driving him to the ground. Through ringing ears and blurred vision, he saw the war machine topple. The damaged leg couldn't support its weight anymore. It crashed sideways, weapons still firing but now aiming uselessly at the sky. Other soldiers converged on it, their kinetic rifles tearing into the exposed underside. The machine tried to right itself, but it was too damaged. Within seconds, it was nothing more than smoking wreckage. Someone pulled Kyung-soo from the rubble. Medics appeared, checking him for injuries. He had cuts, bruises, maybe some broken ribs, but he was alive. "You got one," Sergeant Dong-hyun said, appearing beside him. The sergeant's uniform was torn and blackened, but he was grinning. "Crazy way to do it, but you got one." "Did we win?" Kyung-soo asked. "We're winning," Dong-hyun corrected. 6 machines down, 1 retreating. They couldn't adapt fast enough to our weapons. Across the city, similar scenes played out. Human forces, armed with their primitive kinetic rifles, engaged Valthari war machines at ranges that would have been suicide a month ago. The casualties were heavy. Soldiers fell to plasma fire, crushed by mechanical legs caught in explosions. But the war machines fell too. By nightfall, the assault had been repelled. 14 Valthari war machines destroyed. Human casualties were significant. 200 dead, 500 wounded. But the city held. Commander Taemin stood in the command center, studying the casualty reports. His expression was grim but not defeated. "That's a ratio we can work with," he said quietly. 200 to 14. "If we can maintain that exchange rate, we can actually win engagements." Daeho wanted to object. 200 lives was a terrible cost. Each one represented a person with family, friends, hopes. But Taemin was right from a purely military perspective. Before the kinetic rifles, a single war machine could destroy an entire battalion without taking damage. Now humans could fight back with reasonable odds of survival. "The Valthari will adapt eventually," Hana said. She stood next to a tactical display showing Valthari movements across the sector. "They're not stupid. They'll find a countermeasure." "So we adapt faster," Jiwoo replied. He was working on a new weapon variant at a workbench in the corner. "I'm already designing rifles with different projectile velocities. If they adapt to one speed, we hit them with another." "The soldiers are adapting too," Sumin noted. "The after-action reports show they're getting better at targeting weak points, learning where to aim for maximum damage." Daeho watched through the command center windows as medics worked on the wounded. Supply crews distributed ammunition and equipment. Engineers repaired damaged fortifications. Everyone moving with purpose, working together toward survival. A message came through on the tactical network. Admiral Yunho's face appeared on the main display. "Commander Taemin, I've been reviewing the battle data," the admiral said. "Excellent work. You've proven the kinetic rifles can win engagements against significant Valthari forces." "At a cost, sir," Taemin replied. "We lost good soldiers today." "We lose soldiers every day," Admiral Yunho said, his voice heavy. "But today, for the first time in this war, we lost fewer than we killed. That's progress." He turned his attention to Daeho. "Your weapons are being distributed across all combat zones. Production is at 60,000 units per week and climbing. Every report I'm receiving shows similar results to New Sol. The Valthari are being pushed back. Not far enough, Deho said. They still control most of the colonies. Then we'll take them back, the Admiral replied. One battle at a time. I'm authorizing a counteroffensive. Human forces will begin reclaiming lost territory starting next week. After the transmission ended, Deho found himself outside, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, the Valthari fleet still threatened humanity, but now the threat didn't seem quite so overwhelming. Kyung-soo appeared, walking with a slight limp from his injuries. He carried his kinetic rifle slung across his back. Are you Deho? The young soldier asked. The engineer who designed these weapons? I'm one of them, Deho replied. It was a team effort. I wanted to thank you, Kyung-soo said. This thing saved my life today. Saved a lot of lives. I'm glad it helped. It's weird, Kyung-soo continued. I trained for 3 years on advanced plasma weapons. Learned all the sophisticated targeting systems and energy management protocols. Then you give me something that works like a historical artifact and suddenly I can actually hurt the enemy. Sometimes simple is better, Deho said. Yeah, Kyung-soo agreed. I guess so. The young soldier walked away, heading back to his... 3 months after the New Sol victory, the war had changed completely. The holographic star map in Admiral Yunho's office showed a different picture than before. Blue markers were pushing back against the red. Slowly, painfully but undeniably, humanity was reclaiming lost ground. Deho stood before the Admiral's desk, exhausted but pleased with his latest report. Production of kinetic rifles had reached 200,000 units per week. Every human combat unit now carried them as standard equipment. Training protocols had been updated. Soldiers no longer viewed the weapons as primitive insults but as proven tools that saved lives. The Valthari are changing their tactics, Admiral Yunho said, studying combat data on his personal display. They're keeping their war machines at longer ranges now, using their superior sensors to engage from distances where your kinetic rifles are less effective. We expected that, Deho replied. That's why we're developing longer range variants. Jiwoo's team has created rifles with extended barrels and more powerful propellants, effective range up to 400 meters now. And the Valthari will adapt to those too, the Admiral said. It wasn't a criticism, just a statement of fact. They will, Deho agreed. But every adaptation takes time. Time we use to develop the next generation of weapons. We're also working on non-rifle solutions. Crew-served weapons, artillery pieces, even airdropped munitions. All using the same basic principle. Mechanical simplicity and variation. The Admiral nodded slowly. You've bought us something I thought we'd lost. Hope. Soldiers believe we can win now. That's worth more than any weapon. We're still losing people, Deho said quietly. Every battle, more casualties. Fewer than before, Admiral Yunho reminded him. Before your weapons, we were being slaughtered. Now we're in a fair fight. I'll take those odds. A message alert interrupted them. Suman's face appeared on the communication screen. Deho, we have a situation, she said without preamble. The Valthari just deployed something new on the Hanyang colony. Some kind of adaptive shield generator that covers an entire battlefield area. Our kinetic rifles aren't penetrating. Deho's stomach dropped. How large an area? 5 square kilometers. They're using it to protect multiple war machines simultaneously. Regular shields plus this area effect. It's countering our weapons completely. I'm on my way, Deho said. He looked at Admiral Yunho. Permission to return to the research complex. Granted. Keep me informed. The research complex was in controlled chaos when Deho arrived. Scientists and engineers crowded around displays showing battlefield footage from Hanyang. The Valthari's new area shield shimmered in the air like heat haze, and kinetic projectiles simply stopped when they hit it, falling harmlessly to the ground. They've finally adapted, Jiwoo said. He looked defeated for the first time since Deho met him. They couldn't counter individual kinetic rifles, so they developed a blanket solution. Cover the entire battlefield and neutralize all kinetic weapons at once. How does it work? Hana asked, studying the technical data Sumin had collected. It's projecting a gravitational field, Sumin explained. Not strong enough to affect people or vehicles, but enough to slow projectiles to 0 velocity before they reach the target. The field only affects objects moving above a certain speed threshold. So it stops bullets but not people, Deho said, thinking through the implications. Correct. The Valthari war machines can move freely under the shield, but our projectiles can't touch them. How many of these generators have they deployed? Anna asked. So far, only 2 confirmed. One at Hanyang, one at the Jeonju settlement. Both appeared within the last 24 hours. Then they're new, Daeho said. Probably expensive or difficult to produce. They're testing them in limited deployments. That doesn't help the soldiers at Hanyang, Jiwoo pointed out. They're getting massacred out there. Without effective weapons, they're back to where we started. Daeho paced across the room, his mind racing through possibilities. The Valthari had adapted, just as everyone knew they would eventually. But the adaptation was narrow, specific. It countered high-velocity projectiles by stopping them in flight. That was the weakness to exploit. What if the projectile isn't moving when it hits the shield? He said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. Explain, Suman said. The field stops objects moving above a certain velocity, so we don't fire projectiles through the field. We deliver them underneath it. Daeho grabbed a marker and started drawing on the display board. The field has to have a lower boundary. It can't extend into the ground or it would affect the Valthari machines themselves. So we go under. Tunnels? Hana asked, or trenches. Get soldiers close enough that they're inside the field perimeter. Then the kinetic rifles work normally because they're firing from within the protected area. Jiwoo was nodding, his energy returning. It's risky. Getting close means exposing troops to direct fire. But it's better than having no effective weapons at all. We need more than that, Sumin said. We need a way to destroy the generators themselves. Agreed, Daeho said. What do we know about their physical placement? Sumin pulled up battlefield imagery. The Valthari shield generator was a large device, maybe 5 meters tall, positioned behind the front lines. It was protected by multiple war machines and covered by its own shield. It needs a lot of power, Hana observed. Look at the energy conduits feeding into it. If we could cut the power supply, the shield would fail. How do we cut power lines when we can't even shoot at them? Jiwoo asked. Daeho stared at the images, thinking. Then he remembered something from ancient warfare. Chemical weapons, he said. Not toxic chemicals. Reactive chemicals. We can't shoot projectiles through the shield, but can we throw containers through it? Depends on the velocity, Sumin said, running calculations. A thrown object would be much slower than a bullet. It might pass through. Then we throw incendiary devices, Daeho continued. Simple chemical reactions. Thermite, white phosphorus, anything that burns hot enough to damage those power conduits. Get close, throw the devices, destroy the generator. That's suicide, Hana said flatly. Getting that close to a protected Valthari position? The casualties would be enormous. It's still better than leaving the shield active, Daeho replied. Right now, our soldiers at Hanyang have no effective weapons at all. At least this gives them a chance. They worked through the night developing the new tactics. Chemical incendiary devices that could be thrown by hand or launched from simple mechanical catapults. Infiltration strategies to get soldiers under the shield perimeter. Techniques for close quarters fighting within the field boundaries. Admiral Yun-ho approved the plan with obvious reluctance. This is a stopgap solution. We need a better answer to these area shields. We're working on it, Daeho assured him. But right now, this is what we have. The new tactics were deployed at Hanyang within 48 hours. Daeho watched from the command center as soldiers executed the plan. Small units infiltrated close to Valthari positions, moving through damaged buildings and underground passages. They got within the shield perimeter and engaged with kinetic rifles at point-blank range. The casualties were exactly as high as Hana predicted. But the tactic worked. One team managed to get close enough to the shield generator to throw incendiary devices at its power conduits. The thermite burned through the cables in seconds. The area shield collapsed. Without the shield protection, the Valthari war machines became vulnerable again. Kinetic rifles tore into them from multiple angles. Within an hour, the enemy position collapsed. 230 casualties to destroy one shield generator, Commander Taemin reported grimly. We can't sustain losses like that for long. Then we don't give them time to deploy more generators, Admiral Yun-ho decided. All available forces will push forward immediately. Hit the Valthari before they can establish more shielded positions. The counteroffensive began across multiple fronts simultaneously. Human forces, now confident in their kinetic weapons, pressed the attack. The Valthari were forced onto the defensive for the first time in the war. Word of humanity's new weapons spread beyond military channels. Engineers across human space began developing their own variations. On the colony of Daegu, someone invented a crossbow-like device that fired explosive tipped bolts. On Guangzhou, farmers converted agricultural equipment into massive mechanical throwers capable of launching heavy projectiles over long distances. It's beautiful chaos, Jiwoo said, reviewing reports of the improvised weapons. Everyone's contributing ideas. The Valthari can't adapt because there's no single thing to adapt to. Suman tracked Valthari fleet movements and reported disturbing news. They're consolidating, pulling back from the furthest colonies and concentrating their forces. I think they're preparing for a major engagement. Where? Daeho asked, unknown. But they're moving a lot of ships and war machines to staging areas in the middle sectors. Whatever they're planning, it's big. Hana studied the data with growing concern. They're learning, not just adapting their shields, but changing their entire strategy. They realize scattered attacks don't work anymore, so they're concentrating force. Then we need to be ready, Daeho said. Admiral Yunho, we need to accelerate production even further. If the Valthari are massing for a decisive battle, we need every soldiers. 3 months after the new Seoul victory, the war had changed completely. The holographic star map in Admiral Yunho's office showed a different picture than before. Blue markers were pushing back against the red. Slowly, painfully but undeniably, humanity was reclaiming lost ground. Daeho stood before the Admiral's desk, exhausted but pleased with his latest report. Production of kinetic rifles had reached 200,000 units per week. Every human combat unit now carried them as standard equipment. Training protocols had been updated. Soldiers no longer viewed the weapons as primitive insults but as proven tools that saved lives. The Valthari are changing their tactics, Admiral Yunho said, studying combat data on his personal display. They're keeping their war machines at longer ranges now, using their superior sensors to engage from distances where your kinetic rifles are less effective. We expected that, Daeho replied. That's why we're developing longer-range variants. Jiwoo's team has created rifles with extended barrels and more powerful propellants, effective range up to 400 meters now. And the Valthari will adapt to those too, the Admiral said. It wasn't a criticism, just a statement of fact. They will, Daeho agreed. But every adaptation takes time. Time we use to develop the next generation of weapons. We're also working on non-rifle solutions. Crew-served weapons, artillery pieces, even air-dropped munitions, all using the same basic principle. Mechanical simplicity and variation. The Admiral nodded slowly. You've bought us something I thought we'd lost, hope. Soldiers believe we can win now. That's worth more than any weapon. We're still losing people, Daeho said quietly. Every battle, more casualties. Fewer than before, Admiral Yunho reminded him. Before your weapons, we were being slaughtered. Now we're in a fair fight. I'll take those odds. A message alert interrupted them. Suman's face appeared on the communication screen. Daeho, we have a situation, she said without preamble. The Valthari just deployed something new on the Hanyang colony. Some kind of adaptive shield generator that covers an entire battlefield area. Our kinetic rifles aren't penetrating. Daeho's stomach dropped. How large an area? 5 square kilometers. They're using it to protect multiple war machines simultaneously. Regular shields plus this area effect. It's countering our weapons completely. I'm on my way, Daeho said. He looked at Admiral Yunho. Permission to return to the research complex. Granted. Keep me informed. The research complex was in controlled chaos when Daeho arrived. Scientists and engineers crowded around displays showing battlefield footage from Hanyang. The Valthari's new area shield shimmered in the air like heat haze, and kinetic projectiles simply stopped when they hit it, falling harmlessly to the ground. They've finally adapted, Jiwoo said. He looked defeated for the first time since Daeho met him. They couldn't counter individual kinetic rifles, so they developed a blanket solution. Cover the entire battlefield and neutralize all kinetic weapons at once. How does it work? Hana asked, studying the technical data Suman had collected. It's projecting a gravitational field, Suman explained. Not strong enough to affect people or vehicles, but enough to slow projectiles to 0 velocity before they reach the target. The field only affects objects moving above a certain speed threshold, so it stops bullets but not people, Daeho said, thinking through the implications. Correct. The Valthari war machines can move freely under the shield, but our projectiles can't touch them. How many of these generators have they deployed? Hana asked. So far, only 2 confirmed. One at Hanyang, one at the Jeonju settlement. Both appeared within the last 24 hours. Then they're new, Daeho said. Probably expensive or difficult to produce. They're testing them in limited deployments. That doesn't help the soldiers at Hanyang, Jiwoo pointed out. They're getting massacred out there. Without effective weapons, they're back to where we started. Daeho paced across the room, his mind racing through possibilities. The Valthari had adapted, just as everyone knew they would eventually. But the adaptation was narrow, specific. It countered high-velocity projectiles by stopping them in flight. That was the weakness to exploit. What if the projectile isn't moving when it hits the shield? He said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. Explain, Sumin said. The field stops objects moving above a certain velocity, so we don't fire projectiles through the field. We deliver them underneath it. Daeho grabbed a marker and started drawing on the display board. The field has to have a lower boundary. It can't extend into the ground or it would affect the Valthari machines themselves, so we go under. Tunnels, Hana asked, or trenches. Get soldiers close enough that they're inside the field perimeter. Then the kinetic rifles work normally because they're firing from within the protected area. Jiwoo was nodding, his energy returning. It's risky. Getting close means exposing troops to direct fire. But it's better than having no effective weapons at all. We need more than that, Sumin said. We need a way to destroy the generators themselves. Agreed, Daeho said. What do we know about their physical placement? Sumin pulled up battlefield imagery. The Valthari shield generator was a large device, maybe 5 meters tall, positioned behind the front lines. It was protected by multiple war machines and covered by its own shield. It needs a lot of power, Hana observed. Look at the energy conduits feeding into it. If we could cut the power supply, the shield would fail. How do we cut power lines when we can't even shoot at them? Jiwoo asked. Daeho stared at the images, thinking. Then he remembered something from ancient warfare. Chemical weapons, he said. Not toxic chemicals. Reactive chemicals. We can't shoot projectiles through the shield, but can we throw containers through it? Depends on the velocity, Sumin said, running calculations. A thrown object would be much slower than a bullet. It might pass through. Then we throw incendiary devices, Daeho continued. Simple chemical reactions. Thermite, white phosphorus. Anything that burns hot enough to damage those power conduits. Get close, throw the devices, destroy the generator. That's suicide, Hana said flatly. Getting that close to a protected Valthari position? The casualties would be enormous. It's still better than leaving the shield active, Daeho replied. Right now our soldiers at Hanyang have no effective weapons at all. At least this gives them a chance. They worked through the night developing the new tactics, chemical incendiary devices that could be thrown by hand or launched from simple mechanical catapults, infiltration strategies to get soldiers under the shield perimeter, techniques for close quarters fighting within the field boundaries. Admiral Yunho approved the plan with obvious reluctance. This is a stopgap solution. We need a better answer to these area shields. We're working on it, Daeho assured him. But right now, this is what we have. The new tactics were deployed at Hanyang within 48 hours. Daeho watched from the command center as soldiers executed the plan. Small units infiltrated close to Valthari positions, moving through damaged buildings and underground passages. They got within the shield perimeter and engaged with kinetic rifles at point-blank range. The casualties were exactly as high as Hana predicted. But the tactic worked. One team managed to get close enough to the shield generator to throw incendiary devices at its power conduits. The thermite burned through the cables in seconds. The area shield collapsed. Without the shield protection, the Valthari war machines became vulnerable again. Kinetic rifles tore into them from multiple angles. Within an hour, the enemy position collapsed. 230 casualties to destroy one shield generator. Commander Taemin reported grimly. We can't sustain losses like that for long. Then we don't give them time to deploy more generators, Admiral Yunho decided. All available forces will push forward immediately. Hit the Valthari before they can establish more shielded positions. The counteroffensive began across multiple fronts simultaneously. Human forces, now confident in their kinetic weapons, pressed the attack. The Valthari were forced onto the defensive for the first time in the war. Word of humanity's new weapons spread beyond military channels. Engineers across human space began developing their own variations. On the colony of Daegu, someone invented a crossbow-like device that fired explosive-tipped bolts. On Gwangju, farmers converted agricultural equipment into massive mechanical throwers capable of launching heavy projectiles over long distances. It's beautiful chaos, Jiwoo said. reviewing reports of the improvised weapons. Everyone's contributing ideas. The Valthari can't adapt because there's no single thing to adapt to. Sumin tracked Valthari fleet movements and reported disturbing news. They're consolidating, pulling back from the furthest colonies and concentrating their forces. I think they're preparing for a major engagement. Where? Deho asked. Unknown. But they're moving a lot of ships and war machines to staging areas in the middle sectors. Whatever they're planning, it's big. Hana studied the data with growing concern. They're learning, not just adapting their shields, but changing their entire strategy. They realize scattered attacks don't work anymore, so they're concentrating force. Then we need to be ready, Deho said. Admiral Yunho, we need to accelerate production even further. If the Valthari are massing for a decisive battle, we need every soldier armed and ready. The Admiral agreed. Production Fachi.